everybody, this is Angela Savage, the daughter of IndyCar driver Swede Savage. It's time to watch stories from motorsports. My buddy, Doug Kenny, loves to share the journey of people in racing, and he is an amazing dude. Drivers, owners, fans, and team members, watch the SFM podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Doug Kenny from Stories from Motorsports. I'd like to thank my buddy Josh Mabe for the YouTube work he did years ago that inspired me to create this platform. I'd like to thank my buddy Victor Sifton for convincing me to get back into it after my hiatus from 2017 to 2019. I have a very special treat for you all today with an amazing journey from an amazing racing figure. Drivers, start your engines. Yeah, that sort of reminds me of when Mario Andretti almost won Indy in 1987 when he had that dominant run and then broke down towards the end. It was said that the reason why he was so dominant in that race was because he had Adrian Newey as his mechanic.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's just, it would make sense, yeah.
I think Robbie Gordon had one of those too, where he was leading and then didn't he run out of fuel?
Oh yeah, Indianapolis in 1999 with John Menard.
Yeah, that would just be really unfortunate too.
Yeah, I've looked at his post-race interview afterwards, and I actually think Robbie handled it very well for a guy that lost late in the race, because you got to remember that Marco Andretti, although it was probably just because of the history of his family at Indianapolis, but when he got edged out by Sam Hornish Jr., Marco was all understandably upset and was like seconds nothing, and I think Robbie handled it a little bit better because he just said it just slipped away. That's all it did, Yeah. But yeah, the bottom line is, Robbie handles it gracefully and as far as Indianapolis. And speaking of Menard, I should mention that my favorite driver and my childhood hero is Jamie McMurray. And when Paul Menard won the Indy race in NASCAR in 2011, I remember being really mad at the time because McMurray was leading with like 3 laps to go and I thought he was going to repeat as a Brickyard winner. But looking at the history with John Menard and how he put so much effort into Indianapolis, years later, you just think to yourself, and I do as well, the right guy won that day.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I'm glad for Paul. That was his first win, and the fact that it took place at a track that has meaning to his family. It's just years later, you're just like, why did I get so mad about it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. Do you hope to eventually race in road course racing or ovals, or would you race anywhere?
I would like to race IndyCar just because that's kind of the route that I grew up on. I also look like I want to start an IndyCar team and kind of give someone the opportunity that may be like a little bit, maybe someone a little younger since I am 23 now. I know I'm still so young and still it's possible, but just give someone the opportunity and kind of build that ladder system for the younger generation and pick great drivers to be on the team. And I think it would just be really satisfying, and something that I want to do is just build a really great team in IndyCar. I know a lot of teams now, it's hard to find funding, and I see that the Ladder Series as well is really struggling with funding. So I want to kind of go back in the day where the teams used to find funding, and then you get to pick the drivers. So I think that would be really cool to bring back and start an IndyCar team by doing that.
I think an IndyCar team would be great for you to accomplish down the track when you keep building up, a good way to start maybe a team, just an idea. If you ever want to start your team a good start would probably be GT America or Trans Am even, because I've known a couple owners in that series that have gone on to become team owners in NASCAR and even IndyCar, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So you may want to think about racing in GT America real soon if you can get the funding, you know.
Yep. I've raced GT America a little bit, but I think that would be a great start to kind of build out a team if possible, for sure.
Yeah, I've heard that the cars are pretty pricey since they're Lamborghinis and all that, but if you get the sponsorship, that should help with that for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Sponsorship makes the world go round, right?
Yeah, it does. It's all about the sponsors these days, and we learned that a few years back when Kyle Larson had his struggles, and then with Noah Gragson, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle for the whole community in itself.
Yeah, it is. You know, you can't run a team without sponsors, and you also have to make sure on your end that you're representing the sponsors well, because you know you got to remember that if you make a mistake or do something you regret, you know, these days they could pull the plug on you. You know.
Yeah, for sure. I think that one thing that's a bit different now with being a driver and just owning a team or whatever it may be is you kind of have to be the full package on a sense of have a social media presence, you need to be a good driver, you need to be able to speak well on camera. They're kind of looking for a bigger package rather than back in the day it was like, oh, you're a good driver, it doesn't matter about anything else.
They want to make sure they get a return out of their investment in you.
Yes, for sure. So it's kind of cool to see that shift, and now we see the younger series where there's a racing series like in karting where they actually stream karting now and they do interviews. So it's kind of cool to see that in karting nowadays they're also building those drivers to be what they want as they get older as well, with the interviews and having that presence on camera and being able to speak in front of a camera, because that's what the sponsors want and need as well.
Yeah, if you were a guy like Danny Ungaius, you ever heard of Danny Ungaius?
I think so.
He was an IndyCar driver from the 80s, and he was very private and rarely gave interviews. And yeah, if you're going to be in the sport today, that wouldn't help keep sponsors, you know, being so private.
For sure, you gotta have the full package nowadays.
Yeah. Have you ever been on the receiving end of someone knocking you out of the way or wrecking you intentionally?
Yeah, for sure. I think most drivers go through that in the early stages of their career, and then it happens. Racing incidents happen, and so I would say that it happens to all of us. I think one thing I have noticed is a lot of people ask me, like, oh, do you see that it's harder to earn respect being a female on track? And I'm like, no, I think every driver, male or female, has to earn their respect, and you learn your competitors' driving styles and you learn their personalities to predict what they're going to do on track or how they're going to react in a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of something that people that aren't drivers may not recognize, but us as drivers, we know that you have to read the room, read your competitors in order to make certain decisions on track as well.
Yeah, it's very difficult when you don't know someone in person, because in my case, during my karting days, I got taken out intentionally late in the race by someone, and that driver ended up getting penalized for it.
Yeah, it's good when that happens and then they get penalized for it and don't get away with it, right?
Yeah, do you want to hear the story behind it? Because it sort of ended a little bit hilariously.
Yeah, for sure.
So late in the race, I think it was a race out in Tucson, I believe. I won the pole and had a pretty fast speed, and I was dominating the early stages, and it was obvious that if things continued that I was going to win that day. It was a 90-lap race, I think, or something like that, and we were on lap 55, and what ended up happening was I made a move through a turn. There was somebody right behind me on my bumper, and he didn't even try to make the pass, if you know what I mean. And it was a new driver that I hadn't met yet, but he just didn't try to make the pass, if you know what I mean. The minute we entered the turn, he just ran into me, hoping that would allow him to take that spot. You know, he didn't try to pass cleanly. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I ended up getting hit into the fence and with a wheel broken, and so I had to be towed to the garage. And I told the officials what happened, and they looked at footage, and they immediately they allowed the race to continue, but they penalized the driver, and so from then on his laps were no longer credited. And by the time it ended, he went on to finish in what would have been the first place position. So he started doing burnouts only for officials to call him over, and they informed him that he had been disqualified.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And when they informed him of it, then they pointed to the second place driver that parked, and he started doing burnouts, and that's when I knew that the penalty had been given, and that driver was, I'm sure he wasn't happy, but I hope he learned from it.
For sure. I think everyone's got to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah. Because he had not completed the final laps of his race, however, I ended up finishing one position ahead of him still.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah. But that's what happens in karting, you know. It's way different than NASCAR, you know. In karting, you don't get away with it.
No, you don't get away with stuff like that for sure.
Yeah. When they looked at the cameras, though, they had like footage and everything that showed that he had steered intentionally. They figured it out because of the way his arms had motioned with the wheel, you know.
Yeah, that's good though that they had that available.
Yeah, but I just remember my reaction. I just climbed out of the go-kart, and as he went past under the yellow, I just waved my hands as if to say, dude, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't respond beyond that, but you can imagine if it happened immediately, and if I didn't have a wheel, I probably would have gone after him, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So it's lucky that my wheel came off, otherwise I probably would have waited till he came back around and maybe nudged him a bit.
Yep, that happens.
Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please hit like and subscribe if you did so, and please continue supporting our amazing guest. And everybody, we'll see you next time on SFM.
Hi, this is Ted Warner speaking. While the checkered flag is waved for this program, stay tuned for next week for the next episode of SFM. Thanks to Doug Kenny for what he does for motorsports.